Hi, my name is Michael Hardman. I'm the host tonight we talked to the candidates in Stoughton Conversations, and with us are the three candidates running for selectmen, Christine Howe, Cavey and Rick Hill. And we'll just start opening up with you talking about each other. But first, a full disclosure, I am a supporter of the recall, and I also am honored to work on Mr. Cavey's campaign. But we'll start with Christine. Why are you running for office? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having us today, Mike. As a lifelong resident of this town, after seeing the actions of the Board of Selectmen during the summer, specifically with the appointment of an interim town manager, I took a look at the board and I said, do I trust that they're going to make the best decisions for the residents of this town? And I had to say to myself, no, I don't trust that they're working in our best interests. And I decided that being a public sector employee, having volunteered on different committees in town, including the Finance Committee, the High School Building Committee in Glen Echo, that it was time for me to step up and return some of that trust to the Board of Selectmen. And that kind of was the decision, the deciding factor for why I decided to run in the recall election.
And you're running against Mr. Sousa. Tell us how you differ as a candidate.
While we're both lifelong residents, I think that's kind of where the comparison stops. I'm a devoted public sector employee. I received a master's in public administration and really decided to pursue my career after having worked in the Stoughton Recreation Department during the summers between my undergraduate college years. Working in the basement of the town hall, I got a good sense of how things operated and really saw myself pursuing that career path. So I immediately got my MPA after getting my undergrad degree and I started working for a regional planning agency about 1.5 years ago and volunteered to serve on the Finance Committee as an appointed member and have really sort of decided that public service was for me. And, while I would like to, someday work for a town, a municipality, I looked at what was going on in Stoughton and decided that the best way for me to serve my hometown, my community, was to step up and run for selectman. I'm hoping to bring some of that professionalism, a lens of ethics, a lens of expertise, and some, putting the effort and time and commitment into understanding the issues and developing sort of a long-term vision for the town, as opposed to sort of the short term and not, dedicating all of that to the role as a member of the board.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Stephen, can you tell me a little bit about why you're running for office and how you differ from Mr. Cohn?
Sure. So I'm running for office because I've been just very unhappy with the performance of the selectmen in general for a while now. I've mentioned to people in the past that I started developing an interest for running in February. This was before there was a recall election. This was even before the April elections. And but I watched a Board of Selectmen meeting in which Robert Cohn lost his cool big time. He swore during a public meeting, and this was before the meeting had ended. He swore, used foul language, and then adjourned the meeting afterwards. And I was, personally troubled by that. I think that doesn't really represent our values. I'm not easily offended, but I just felt like if that had happened at any corporation, if I had done that at a convention, that would be my last day on the job. It's not professional. It's not appropriate. And so in February, I started putting together my campaign. Started the Facebook page. I started putting things together, getting the paperwork together for it. And when I heard that there was interest in a recall election after more bad behavior by our current selectmen, I contacted people involved with the recall and let them know that I was interested in running against Cohn. I had already essentially started the machine rolling, and that it was a little bit early, but I was happy to step in and run against him. I think it's really very important. As far as our main differences, I guess that there's a couple things that stand out. One is, one thing that's bothered me about it, the outburst is an example, but he's done things that are just generally, he may call passionate. I think it's undisciplined, and and I think that one of the things that I excel at is keeping a cool head, being smart about things, not allowing my passions to get away from me. And I think that I would like to apply that to the problems that we have. My background is finance, so I especially really think that a lot of what we're dealing with as a town comes back to our spending, how and our finances. And in that case, with those kinds of problems, you really have to be able to keep your cool.
And Rick, so you're running against Peter Brown. Can you tell us a little bit about why you're different than him and why you decided to run for that?
Sure. I think part of my participation in town government has always centered around process. Watching the Board of Selectmen recently, over the last year actually, temperament has been a huge issue, and that deeply concerns me. So we seem to be a headline in the state for bad behavior, and every time an issue comes up to be addressed, it seems like it's dealt with more on an emotional level versus a thought out and considered process approach. I think the trigger for a lot of people was the way the former town manager was removed from his job. So there's no desire here to bring back the last town manager. Again, for me, it was about process. I am, deeply concerned that a vote was taken to not renew his contract after never giving him any feedback about it. Why are you doing this? What are the issues? Were there any performance reviews? Mr. Sousa's on record saying that he was not going to give him a performance review on purpose for a bunch of reasons. So it seems to me like he was set up to fail. Again, I really am not sure what the reasons are why his contract was not renewed. Mr. Hardman would publish a town manager's update every month, very detailed, pages and pages long. So there was a question about communication, and Mr. Hardman wouldn't communicate with us. And as well, I think that if anybody had read that document every month as I had, I was pretty plugged into what projects were going on. I haven't seen it since he's left, but it was a pretty good tool for communicating with the folks. So, and temperament on top of that. So we get into discussions, and it seems like emotions take over, and we start managing by emotion versus by facts and data. The most recent one was when one of the selectmen, I think it was Mr. Sullivan, wanted to have a discussion about starting a search for a new town manager. What a novel idea. We terminated his contract, or didn't vote to renew it back in December. It's now November, 11 months later, and no effort's been made to surface a new permanent person in that position. So Mr. Sousa stepped up and said, well, why don't we fix this right now and to remove the interim title from Mr. Anastas's title and make him permanent town manager. So in the meeting that took 6 minutes to appoint him, with no interviews, no advertising for positions, no review of candidates, I think there was a candidate, there was a Board of Selectmen, a member of the board, that hadn't even met him yet. In that 6-minute meeting, this was going to be less than a minute to make him the permanent town manager. Again, all because of motion. It was very clear that Mr. Sousa was aggravated by this. So I see multiple examples of this, and reacting to emotion versus to process. I'm just used to doing the homework. I'm used to doing the hard work to gather all the information, to making sure we share and disseminate information. My 9 years on the Finance Committee, 4 as chair, 4 as vice chair, we never had anything like this happen. Just because there was a great regard for the people, whether it was the people on the committees or the other committees that were supporting the Finance Committee, or the citizens that came to talk to us, or the town employees. There was a deep respect, and decorum was important. And sure, every once in a while, stuff would get under your skin, but your greater responsibility at this point is to remain professional, focused, and to manage to the data that you have, and then get the data that you need if you don't have it. So,
Rick, you did a good job explaining what happened with the town manager, but I really want to know from the three of you, and anyone can answer this question, is how would you have done the process differently? And the same thing with the police chief too, which was kind of delayed and ran into problems too. So anyone who wants to take that question.
With regard to the police chief, I would say that, so, you know, the situation is that there was a relatively short process. There was no interview, as I recall, and our current chief, Chief McNamara, received the job. And from all I've heard, I've only heard good things about her. She seems like an excellent person, and she's going to serve this town, extraordinarily well. And I hope she stays on as police chief, as long as she's willing to do the job. But as far as how you get a job, I mean, there is a process. There's been an evolution in the way that human resources is managed. That process that has been developed over decades, both governments and corporations, is there for a reason. It's there to protect people. It's there to protect institutions, and you follow it not just because you like red tape, and you like to deal with issues. You do it because it is honestly the best way that we've come up with to do this that respects sort of everybody. And so we hired a firm to do a search. That wound up getting essentially ignored. How would I handle it differently? I would say leave this to the experts. How you delegate those responsibilities to people who understand that process. Find people you can trust, listen to their advice, and from a pool of candidates, make the best decision you can. And I don't think that was done.
Yeah, and just to add on that, you brought up a good point, Steve, about we don't just like red tape or bureaucracy. We're doing this because this is for the town. This is for the town of Stoughton, and the residents deserve a process that was vetted, a process that allowed for public hearings, that was open and transparent, so that everybody could be assured that we did. We went to the greatest lengths we could to hire the most qualified person. I mean, there's surrounding towns that are currently looking for town managers. There's, consulting groups, as you mentioned. There's the Collins Center at UMass Boston. There's so many examples of other communities. There's 351 municipalities in Massachusetts. There's so many other examples of town managers that were sought out and hired that were the best, most qualified individuals to hire. The position itself has become so much more professionalized. They have trade associations, they have networks, and these qualified individuals exist. And we won't know that we get someone like that unless we follow a process and we make it open, transparent, and allow for even some public input at something like a public hearing or a public interview.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just to tag on to that, Christine and Stephen, it took a year. And they got 6 months deep into the process, realized, their new attorney realized that they had violated a number of procurement laws, had to stop and start all over again. Because again, process, there was no process. And we lost a half a year, again, without not having a permanent chief in place. So when they came right down to selecting a final candidate, and there were 5 finalists, and they were interviewed by an external company, and they were promised that they were going to be interviewed. And in the 11th hour, Mr. Sousa decided to not allow that and put it up for a vote and selected Donna McNamara as the chief. And I think Donna's doing a great job. So I've got no issue with that. What I'm concerned about are the 4 candidates and Donna that didn't get a chance to be interviewed by anybody in this town. And now Donna is the chief and has to work with those folks that never got a chance to interview for the job that she has. So again, it was mismanaged. There's consequences to process. And Jeff had asked me a question in my one-on-one: does the end result matter? We got Donna, and that's the good news. And I'd say the end result, it's how you got there which matters. So if you do it dutifully, then you'll end up with the result that you're looking for.
And there's a level of fairness and equity too for the individual that was selected, because if we had a finance subcommittee meeting with public safety to go over the budget, and this was shortly after Chief McNamara was appointed, and she said I was ready for that interview, and as you said, she's been doing a fantastic job, but by not allowing this process to play out, it's not fair to her who she can't go through the whole interview process, and in a way it almost taints the appointment. And the same with the interim town manager. If you want to make him permanent, there's always going to be this dark cloud over the process if you don't follow it. So you should allow those individuals for their fairness and for equitable sort of selecting of employees, because ultimately it impacts both sides. So.
Well, absolutely. I really think that as I said, like the process is there to protect the people as well, and I think that if the process had been followed, I think you'd be protecting the person who got the job. If that was McNamara, that would be great too. She'd be assured that the process has been followed, and there would be no cloud over her tenure.
Speaking of clouds hovering over, one of the clouds we're looking at is the lawsuit by Michael Hardman, and there's some misinformation about that out there. I'd like to see your points on this.
Let me jump in on that real quick. So I believe that there were 5 actions taken by Mr. Hardman. He has filed a lawsuit against the town. He's filed individual lawsuits against each of the 3 selectmen, and he also filed for an injunction to stay his dismissal. So that hearing was already held, and the judge indicated that there was no irreparable harm because Mr. Hardman could be made whole again by money. At the outset of that hearing, the judge said, "I'm here to rule on just this injunction, not the rest of the lawsuits or anything else related to it." So it was a very complicated decision, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to delve into it. I've talked to a number of attorneys who've read it and have given me opinions on it. But at the end of the day, he took those 5 actions. So if the selectmen had followed the charter and just got 4 votes to terminate Mr. Hartman's agreement, then there'd be no issue here. His contract references the charter. And again, we can argue this all day back and forth, but at the end of the day, the courts are going to need to decide it, and the exposure is significant.
Absolutely. Well, I agree with you with your assessment. One of the things that the point I'll agree with the strongest is that I'm not an attorney either, and this is in the courts. I definitely don't know for a fact the results of this case. It's in front of somebody, in front of a judge. The injunction was the only thing that had been addressed, and that there's so little information that went into that decision, and that because of how quickly it had to be made, that's par for the course, and without any testimony, with very little legal information available, the judge made a ruling on one very minor piece of the full case. We'll see how the rest of this goes. I really do personally have strong feelings that the charter was not followed. That based on my own understanding of Mass General Law, but also the charter itself, this process really stinks for me. But the one thing I would like to add is that even in the event that this turns out to be, all perfectly legal, I am still very troubled by the way that this happened, because I kind of don't want to be too harsh here, but there's a sort of a sneakiness about how this all transpired. The claim from the 3 selectmen who are being recalled is that they sent a letter. This was all known in December, or January or March, that he was going to be going, right? That June 30th was going to be his last day. So far as my own experience has been, I've worked with contract work, employees in the past, and on their last day, you bring them a cake, you thank them for their service, you wish them luck. By all accounts, Hardman left with the keys to the building still in his pocket, right? Mm-hmm. He assumed he was coming back, And they changed the locks after he left. They disabled his email account after he left. And then once they knew he was out of town, that's when they had a hearing to replace him. And that smells horrible, right? That is not how we do things. Even if you think you're right, you are clearly doing something you know is you're trying to hide. Right? I'm very disturbed by that fact. That once again, the process of doing this just smells horrible. I think they know that what they were doing was controversial at the very least, and the method they went about doing it was not appropriate to the leadership of our town.
And it was also completely unnecessary.
Exactly.
These other, town managers' contracts have expired. Other town managers' contracts have expired without, a potential end in sight, and negotiations and things have occurred, and they've either come to a consensus and create a new contract, or the person has moved on beyond, the June 30th deadline of expiration.
Yeah.
So this has happened in the past, and it wasn't necessary. So there's a reason that they behaved the way they did. I'm not sure why. Steve, you pointed out that it stinks. And there's something, there's something there. There's something to it. And it really ultimately unnecessarily exposed the town to risk. If his lawsuit is successful, that's going to be very unfortunate for this town as far as the impact it will have on the budget. I think in Easton, they recently settled with the town manager, and it was over $600,000. The town ended up owing in damages. So, it's completely unnecessary is really what it is. And if we're going back to Rick's statements about process, if they had just followed the process and the precedent, then we wouldn't be where we are today.
But it's also, and I don't want to beat this dead horse, but I think it's worth focusing on. Mr. Hardman had made known that he was leaving for 2 weeks on a family medical leave under the FMLA Act. And he went out to the Midwest to visit his mom, who was deeply ill, maybe for the last time. While he was out of town, they unceremoniously locked him out of his office, collected his personal effects, had them delivered to the police department. They changed his email account and served him a no trespass notice. I couldn't think of I wouldn't do that to my worst enemy. And again, just to talk about how underhanded it was, and I'll say it was underhanded. It was sneaky, and it was a way for them not to follow process or be transparent, or to pony up and give the guy a review and tell him why you don't like him or what he could do to change or fix his behavior. But none of that happened. And again, these are just more things that lead us to distrust this current group of 3 people. And you'll hear all of us say this phrase, it's a pattern of behavior. I don't trust that tomorrow they're not going to make a decision that's going to affect us. Every single Board of Selectmen meeting that goes on, there's an opportunity for liability or to put this town in jeopardy or to put this town as another headline. And I'm speaking of even of the most recent, as of the most recent Board of Selectmen meeting that we had. They love to be able to parade all the accomplishments of the town, but those aren't attributable to this board or to the interim town manager. The town manager hired a bunch of professionals to run their department. They had a bunch of projects in process, and there was a plan to be followed, and it was happening. The bond rating was a result of a lot of hard work by the finance committees and town meeting and other committees and department heads to get there. It took years. It didn't take 90 days. And it's almost an insult to hear that people are trying to take credit for all of that hard work to improve the bond rating. But again, that's a whole nother story.
But Steve, you know a lot about the bond rating. I mean, you explained it well on a Facebook post. Can you paraphrase that a little bit?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's as I've said to other people who, I understand that bonds and bond ratings are like complicated things most people don't have to deal with too deeply. But essentially a bond is going to be something like, you're taking a loan. And just like with your own personal credit score, there's going to be a rating that some of these independent companies will generate to help investors understand the risks of investing in that bond. What are the chances of default? And the types of things they look at I consider pretty obvious things, right? They're looking to see what's your payment history, how much money, how much revenue do you have relative to the amount of debt that you're currently holding, it's things along those lines. And when they look at it, they're looking at, just like a credit reporting company, they're looking at years and years of data. Another really important, very critical piece of this also is that they also want to see that you have controls in place to monitor your payments, your accounting, and also to make sure that that you have policies in place, also that you can follow and they can understand, that will help protect the municipality, in this case, as a municipal bond, against default. Those things take a lot of time to generate. We've had these policies for quite some time. And the credit history that they're looking at, the bond history that they're looking at, I don't know for a fact how far they go back. I know that our personal stuff usually goes by 7 years or something. Mm-hmm. I think with bond ratings, I think it goes back further, but I might be mistaken. It's certainly not 6 months. They're not looking to see what you did in the last 3 months to determine whether or not you have this credit worthiness. And the idea that somebody who has been here for 3 months has not yet actually been involved in the budget process, has not generated a budget for the town, even once, can claim responsibility for our current bond rating is like embarrassing. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. And he might be able to accomplish a lot of things, but that is like beyond a miracle. That is not humanly possible. And so the fact that people sort of claim that really, I think, insults our intelligence.
We'll talk a little bit about what your opponents are saying. Your opponent's saying, Mr. Cohn says insurance covers it. Mr. Sousa said, Mr. Brown say the case is over, they won. How do you talk about that to the people out there that are undecided? And they're kind of saying, well, yeah, it's over, they won the court case. But it isn't. How do you get to those people, the voters out there that are kind of confused because they're hearing mixed messages? They hear from you, it's going to be costly. They hear from them, don't worry about it, we got insurance. How do you handle that?
I know I just answered a question, but there's one thing I really want to address here. Okay. Is when I hear the statement, don't worry about it, we have insurance. Can you imagine getting into a car with somebody who said that? I mean, that is reckless. And just from a financial standpoint, I mean, that speaks for itself. If someone says, don't worry about it, we have insurance, mm-hmm. Do not trust them.
Well, you were served notice on the finance committee, or have a copy of a notice from the insurance company, correct? Yeah. The insurance company has put the town on notice, saying that if this dismissal was willful and didn't follow process, that limits the scope of their liability to like maybe salary, maybe $50,000 or half the salary, 6 months salary, whatever it might be. Significantly limits it. And it's an unusual act for an insurance company to take, and they only take it when they think that there's probable cause or potential for there to be issues that are not quite above board or proprietary or following process and procedure. So we now have that added to it, and you won't hear them talk about it. We've already used up our deductible of $10,000, and we have an attorney sitting at every Board of Selectmen meeting, unprecedented, meters running every time he's sitting there, and they would say it's built into the retainer. I don't think I've seen an agreement about their retainer. I don't think that they have a retainer. I think that there was a memo, a one-sentence memo said our billing rate is X, $175 an hour. Mm-hmm. There is no other detail around the town's contracting with, or lack of contracting with, this firm.
And a lot of what I've been hearing as well is there's residents in town who think that if they vote against the recall, then the cost, the $26,000 estimated cost of the election will not happen. And that's not true either. And I don't know where that rumor has originated, but it's definitely out there in the ether. And I think residents should know that A, this cost is built into the town clerk's budget and the police overtime budget for the detail that would be required. And B, the $26,000 is the cost of the election. That's happening no matter what on December 5th. Mm-hmm. So, it's a matter of dispelling these rumors, just providing people with information and the facts, referring them to the selectmen meetings themselves so that they can understand the issues and what is going on. Laying it out as Rick did about the 5 actions, so they understand that the injunction was just one piece of that. Providing them with documentation of expenses, of notices from insurance companies. That's the way to really get at this, is to encourage people to read some information and get the facts, assess and
So for the
reduce.
current selectmen to not, and I don't mean to jump in on top of you, Christine, here, but for the current selectmen to say that it's all done, really is disconcerting. If they think it's done, that's really a problem. So, and the fact that, they're letting the people that are supporting them think it's done is a huge problem. So,
I don't want to get into doomsday predictions because that kind of feeds into what you're saying about them saying it too. But where does this money come from? All of your finance experience, where would we pay this if the town is found liable for it?
They'd really have to think about that. I mean, certainly the finance committee has a reserve, but if it's a significant settlement, the money will have to come from the town coffers, and they might need even to bring this to town meeting in some way, shape, or another with an article to set aside money or free cash or something to pay it. But the town would pay it and then figure out a way to manage it. But still, it'd be a liability from the country. We've had unusual high expenses come in. So the insurances, the health cost assessments, and the trust would come in significantly high. We'd have to make an adjustment for whatever reason, and we'd figure it out. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot of hard work for to determine how you're going to pay for that. So
Yeah, I mean, the important thing is also to keep in mind that something else is going to have to give, right? Even if we're able to find it, that means something else is not going to be funded.
Right.
And so we're going to have to figure out, whose budget gets slashed, who's going to have to. So it's going to come from somewhere in our current funding. We don't have, a ton of cash lying around. We are going to have to find this, and we're going to take it out of somebody else's, financing.
Well, speaking of cuts, your opponents say that one of the things you're going to do when you get office is cut public safety. How can you just spell that? Are you going to do it, or how do you get the money to pay for that?
I certainly have an opinion on that, but as a matter of fact, I think I've been referenced by Mr. Sousa recently saying that when 2 additional officers were proposed as a floor amendment by Mr. Brown in the last town meeting, he said that I voted against it. I was kind of hiding off to the side and voted against it, hoping people wouldn't see me vote, which is really seems to be his method of behavior. Anyway, I did vote against the 2 officers on the floor because there was no plan to pay for them. So we had just agreed to hire 12 firefighters and I believe 4 new police officers, 16 new personnel. Our new chief on the fire department went out and found some grants, which were terrific, and there's shotgun funding for these things, which is going to help. But at the end of the day, after 2 years, we own them. So we've increased staffing by 16 positions with not an iota of a plan of how to pay for it. And Mr. Brown gets up and wants to do 2 more with no plan. And it was only $26,000. Well, it was $26,000 to fund the positions for the last month of the fiscal year, I believe. Those positions are about $100,000 a piece fully loaded. So there's a $200,000 expense, $1 million over 5 years, on top of all of the expenses that are going on at this point. And so then they'll turn around and say, oh, they want to raise your taxes. I've never said that. We would have to look at the revenue flows. We're looking for new and creative ways to save money or to find new monies. The bond rating was one of those very creative long-term programs that yielded results. Interest doesn't do us any good. It just allows us to borrow money. So the less amount of interest you have to pay, the better. And so we've created all kinds of new opportunity to repurpose that money to pay for other projects. But the public safety is an important component of our town and our government, our responsibility to our citizens, and we absolutely need to make sure that that's taken care of. But we need a plan. These positions seem to be arbitrary. How do we need? Was there a study? Was there I hate saying, was there a consultant brought in to say we needed all these folks, or do we need more? I don't know what our long-term need is. The opioid epidemic is a significant issue and impacts us. So the population hasn't changed much, but the complexity or the complexion of what law enforcement is dealing with today is much different than it was, say, just 10 years ago.
And I will say that when when FinCom did meet with, the police department and fire department last year, these department heads, the chiefs, Chief Laracy, Chief McNamara, they're working really hard to figure out these long-term plans. They understand their staffing and where their needs are. They understand, how many individuals will need to run, say, 2 ambulances to allow for us to use less mutual aid from, Avon, of all places, smaller towns. Then, that helps in, with the cooperation between departments too across town lines. So, and as you mentioned, Chief Laracy got the SAFER grant to get 8 new firefighters, which is incredible. He got an Assistance to Firefighters grant to help pay for equipment. He presented a long-term capital improvement plan. So, to say that there's no plan in place, I think the department heads are working really hard to figure that out. And ultimately where it's going to come from is once you're fully staffed, hopefully overtime will decrease. And, those things like the ambulance fees will be able to maintain a certain amount to assist with the employment. And then it comes down to contracts as well. You need to make sure that, you're not sort of bankrupting yourself through contract negotiations. So there are grants available. The department heads are working hard, and they're doing a good job, and they've got a long-term plan. And it just requires you, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, to be on the same page, having these conversations and figuring it out together. You can't just get up at one town meeting and just say, I want 20 new employees. There should be an incremental plan in place so that we, in 15 years, can afford to keep these people employed and make sure that the town is as safe as it needs to be and has the right resources and can address things like the opioid epidemic and work collaboratively without taxing mutual aid and things like that.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add is that I want to be kind of blunt about this, is that I've heard from certainly from Sousa, I think Cohn as well, that and I would be surprised if Brown said this as well, that they are against raising taxes, but they are for these additional services, and that is just a mathematical impossibility. Mm-hmm. We can't do that any more than we can time travel. That if you want to generate an expense, public safety, in this case, you're going to have to pay for that. And the money does not come, from like a magic well. Like, we need to actually generate that somehow. And there's certainly, people have the finance people in the finance committee have. We have an excellent finance committee, very smart people, who work very hard to find a way to make this happen. There are, departments work diligently also to be very respectful of the resources, of the tax dollars. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to come from nowhere. It has to come from somewhere. So if people want public safety, which I definitely do, I desperately want it. I think that the fire department, I think Station 1, that's a very old building, mm-hmm. and having to run a modern fire department out of this this almost 100-year-old building, it's like 75 years old, yeah. is impossible to believe, right? They must be working so much harder than they have to operate out of that building. And I see a real problem with that. And I want to see that fixed. But if we do that, if that's something we are passionate about, then we're going to have to find the money to finance that. Mm-hmm. And I also, I don't want to be raising people's taxes. I inside of my own thoughts, I have these conflicting desires for more services, but not lower taxes. I think a lot of people have that. And what we have to do is not think about, we can't separate these things out and say, on this side, we want low taxes, and then I'm going to sort of ignore that for a second and say, I also want services. These are, in fact, there's a ratio between those two desires that we are going to have to find a balance for. There's going to have to be a ratio of how much we're willing to put in and what we expect to get out. And if we all come together when we agree, what's more important to me is no raising of taxes, then I just want people to understand that the consequences of that decision is that we can't then afford new services. You know, it's not going to happen. If you want a little bit of taxes and a little bit of services, we can do that. If you want a lot of services, then it's going to cost more money. And I think that's really important that people understand that you're being promised mathematical impossibilities.
I want to skip around a little bit because we're rapidly running out of time. You guys giving such great answers and covering such areas. I want to talk about, playing off that, about the business climate in town, and how do you go about attracting more business, and what do you think your opponent's record has been on business in the town?
Well, I'll say that we have a very strong planning and economic development offices in town. Those department heads have, I think every town meeting, the economic development coordinator, Pam McCarthy, comes to town meeting saying, these are the grants that I've applied for, and I've also received all of them. So she's doing a fantastic job, and it really is working with a lot of those state agencies that provide those opportunities for downtown revitalization. You know, Stoughton isn't the first town to have a downtown that needs to be looked at, revitalized, and improved. There's, you know, business improvement districts that you can do, just wayfinding, rebranding, complete streets. These resources exist at a state level that municipalities are then able to access. So it's a matter of being aware of those things, first of all, working with those department heads like your economic development coordinator, your town planner, reviewing the master plan and referring to that, because there is a downtown master plan, and then having those conversations with the stakeholders. I can't say that I've seen the selectmen make any indication that they've done this or that they're planning to do this, and it takes work and it takes time, and I'm not sure that they're willing to put in that effort. So
It seems like this happens around them.
right.
So the economic development coordinator's position was developed by the previous town manager because he recognized the need for economic development. We have a master plan that's just sitting there. There's nothing happening to it. There's been studies done in the downtown by the redevelopment authority that the selectmen have ignored. Pam McCarthy has also proposed, is it a 33L, to help figure out how to fund sewerage going down Park Street, because Campanelli Business Park is down there, and we can certainly support more business. It would help fill that area up, and oh, by the way, we'd be getting additional utility revenues, so it's a win-win. Now, the way to do this is that they're going out to all of the stakeholders in this, to the neighbors and to the businesses, and they're polling them and just saying, would you support this or not? And then based on the results of that, they'll come back to the town meeting and then make a proposal on that too. So again, everybody's involved. She put through an article at last town meeting about block grants. We couldn't get any funding for block grants unless we had taken several steps. Pam took those steps, made them happen, did presentations to the Board of Selectmen and to other groups. So she's been really on her game, and it's helped our town. But again, it seems to happen around the Board of Selectmen, these three in particular, that these things are kind of news to them as they're happening. They think they're great ideas. They endorse them. They get behind them, most of the time. And that's great, but it's because we have had in place great department heads that are doing a terrific job, that are still running on the momentum of the leadership that they have had or lost.
And I'm glad you brought up the redevelopment authority, because I believe they issued a vote of no confidence on the current selectmen. And that's because of this pattern where things, motions are made to put things on future agendas, and then the things just disappear. And it's a matter of them not being able to overcome this conflict that they're having amongst the 5 members.
Yeah.
They have to be able to work together through their internal issues so that things can actually get accomplished. And they just have been unable to do that and have taken things off agendas or not addressed items. And it's solely rooted in this internal conflict they have and their inability to move beyond it. And it's just, we're going to be in this stronghold where we're stuck in one place and can't move forward if they continue to behave the way they are.
I think that's an excellent point. We really are frozen in place. One of the things that's really bothered me is over the last couple of months is, as we were getting closer to the fall, I was expecting to see that we'd have a town meeting, an opportunity to vote on something, right? And the fact that our selectmen have generated nothing to vote on is really troubling. You know, the fact is that 2017 is like almost a lost year because we've not moved this town forward. There's nothing to vote on. There's nothing. You know, we haven't accomplished anything. It's time to move on.
I want to show the ballot coming up here too, because it's a little bit different than a normal ballot because you have to go in and vote recall, and then you guys vote individually.
Yeah.
It'll be Christine against Mr. Sousa, and then you'll be against Mr. Cohn on it, but you have to vote the recall first, and then you have to go back. It'll be you against Mr. Brown too. So you want to show that to people and make sure you're careful when you vote on this, because I think the last thing we've been through with all this is we want a voting controversy. I think we could probably want to avoid that, I would guess.
I want everybody to be able to vote.
And there's the ballot right
What
there.
they
as you
want.
can see
And the
sample
disclosure
ballot.
is this is a mock-up, correct?
Right,
This is
yeah.
not an actual
No,
copy of
don't
the
copy
ballot.
this off your TV and vote
Right.
before you go to the vote, okay?
And
let's
this is a good opportunity to plug absentee ballots
Right.
too. I believe
Right.
those are available November 13th.
Correct.
And you can go and talk to the town clerk and, you know, submit your absentee ballot, and that's important for voters too. And you know, just try to ask the questions, ask the town clerk the questions that you have about the election, because it's really important that everybody is able to voice their opinion by going to the ballot box and voting.
And I want to stress too, it's also important that people go on your Facebook pages, your web pages, reach out to you're everywhere, just as your opponents are, and ask you questions too. Because I think a lot of people out there, they're catching on to the recall and they have a lot of information. It's very important at that election. You want to make sure people are well informed. One of the things I want to deal with really quickly, we're running out of time. It always goes too fast when you guys get together. The other thing I want to talk about is one of the decisions you're going to face right away is the town manager and how Mr. Nassos was chosen. How do you change that? What do you do if you're elected and you're in the office December 6th? What steps do you take?
I'd have to say that no matter what the makeup of the board is December 6th, they're up to their eyeballs in work. So the budgets have to be done and prepped and ready for town meeting and are due to the Finance Committee by the third Tuesday in January. The warrant articles that accompany that also have to be worked out, which are again the capital plan for the coming year. The issue of a permanent town manager is there. I think probably they at some point are going to revisit this attorney relationship because the last town attorney that we had was just unceremoniously dismissed. Not sure why, but that happened, and now we have an attorney that's at every single Board of Selectmen's meeting. So I'm sure that's going to be a topic. Plus all of the buzz projects we keep talking about, the issue of the town center, of the train station, of Glen Echo. We've got a bunch of other projects that are happening, terrific projects. The water treatment plant, which will have a return on investment for us. All the investment we've made into water structure, but again, December 6th, that board has a boatload of work to do, and you just got to roll up your sleeves and get it done. You have to do the research and the homework, and make sure the information is available to make the right decisions for this town.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I was actually going to go in a slightly different direction, but that's very persuasive. I think that I've already argued that we haven't gotten much done, but the fact is that we have quite a list of things that need to be accomplished that are extremely high priority. Budget is very high up there, and with regard to the town manager, that's not the first thing. When we hit the ground running, we're going to have to get the town situated very quickly. As the budget requirements come up, that's first priority. And when we have a chance to breathe, when we can come up from air, then we can start to look at where we currently are, where we stand, and what I would like to really see. There's no particular outcome I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is to be able to have a smart discussion about what our priorities are, what our goals are, and work together to try to find a way to find a compromise so that we can get most of what we want.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As Rick and Steve laid out, there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we're up for it. I think we're ready to dive in, and the town manager search process, that's going to take at a minimum probably 6 months. So as far as management of that department goes, that's going to have to be determined by that board after December 6th, so that then they can put in hopefully that search committee and get that process going. But you know, I think the individuals sitting here are at least up for the challenge and up for stepping up and jumping in. So
We got a little bit of time left. Would you favor the current board starting the search now, if they start the next meeting?
Well, again, they tried to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really a ready, fire, aim process. It's like duck hunting. So when it was brought up to do this, the three were vehemently against it. Really didn't give us the reasons, but you know, it begs the question: why on January 1st of this year did we not start the search process for a new town manager? Because their full intention is that the last town manager, his contract was not renewed, and in their mind, it was a done deal, and there was no going back on that. But they waited until June 30th to take final actions on all of that, and even since that point, have done nothing but make bad decisions about interim town managers, never mind the town manager. So they haven't started the town manager process. They've made bad decisions and have followed no process in bringing in interim town managers, and again have exposed us to more liability. So that has to be fixed. It's got to be remedied, and you know, we just got to do the hard work about you know, following process. And if there's not a process, then we need to, you know, put one in place and make sure that it's followed. If the charter needs to be reviewed, then it needs to be reviewed, not in the heat of the moment, but by people that will, you know, consider the right things to do and bring it through a bunch of people and paths to make sure that you know, we've got an enduring process go forward. It's like the Constitution. It's Stoughton's Constitution, and it's there for a reason. The recall is in the charter for a reason. The process to terminate the town manager is in there for a reason, because boards of selectmen change every year, and you know, that would put us at risk if just the majority were able to terminate them because they didn't, you know, they weren't doing what they wanted them to do because of political issues, and you know, the Board of Selectmen can be very political. I have no political aspirations other than that to be of service to the town of Stoughton. So
When you're looking at this, you've all run for a while now, you're in the home stretch. What have you learned about the town, really quickly, like in a few sentences? What stood out about the people you've met and the journey you've taken here?
The one thing that just stands out to me, hands down, is that the people of Stoughton will fight for what they think is right. That they're not afraid to work hard, and the amount of the number of people I've come in contact with who've dedicated, you know, decades of their lives to making this town better is just endless. And you know, and I didn't realize that until I started getting involved in this and I started talking to more people. But the people here really care to make this place better. And you know, I definitely hope to work with anybody who's willing to work with me. I'm willing to work with them.
yeah, I mean, I would, you know, for a long time I've been sort of against running for public office, and a lot of it is that campaigning isn't my thing. You know, I want to get into the nitty-gritty policy work, but those one-on-one conversations with people and just the passion that they bring, that just reminds me every day why I'm doing this. You know, as Steve mentioned, people have dedicated so much of their lives. They care about this town, whether, you know, their great-great-grandfather lived here or they've lived here for 2 months or 10 years or whatever it may be. People love Stoughton, and I just hope that by doing this and, you know, just meeting the people and them seeing what we're doing, what we're trying to bring to the town is a reflection of their values. We want to make this town better. We want to move the town forward. We want to bring that passion and that care and that concern to the highest executive office, which is the Board of Selectmen. So those, you know, that's what it's all about.
I was going to ask you, tell a little bit about yourself at the end, but you've done that. What I really wanted to ask you about is, on December 6th, how do you get the people whose passion has been so high on the other side not supporting you, and how do you get them to know that we have to work together after December 6th? We got about 3 minutes left.
well, let me take 30 seconds.
You have longer than that.
My intention is to represent the people of Stoughton. So if there are issues out there that need to be addressed or need to be challenged, because there are assertions that, you know, we're running because we want to seize power. I'm not sure what that means. You know, we don't want to change the name of the town. We don't want to do anything. We don't, you know, that's going to be negative for the town. Well, we're going to do this so we can raise taxes and make Stoughton like Newton. No, we're not. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I am in this for all the residents. So, you know, a rising tide raises all ships, and that's my intention. So if there are people, you know, that we need to help on both ends of the spectrum, I'm all in for it. So on December 6th, I just have the people's agenda, and I'm just from the short period of time I've known the other candidates that I think they're in agreement with that.
Yeah, just in my own background, I've been involved with, I've been boxed, I've done judo. The fact is, you fight sometimes, you argue, and at the end of the day, you know, when you're done, you shake hands, and you know, and these could be your friends. The fact is, the people I am friends with multiple people on that are against this recall, and I've never been able to we have never sort of been able to. We're always able to come together, right? We're always able to talk, have respectful conversations. If I'm elected, I know whether you agree with this recall or not, contact me. I'm here for you. I want to represent you. I want to represent your values. I want to represent your needs, your wants. I want to hear from you. I can't do that. I can't represent you if I don't know what you're thinking. And so please reach out to me. Let me know your thoughts. I'm here for you. I'm not going to hold any grudges. I don't, you know, the past is the past. After this election, you know, from my side, I'm ready to move on doing the right thing for this town.
Yeah, and I would just say that, you know, the platform is that we want to do what's best for Stoughton. And I think there will need to be some sort of coming together on December 6th from both sides. Just let people sort of air their grievances and just have it all sort of resolved. We had a great event, the Keep Stoughton Beautiful event. Everybody from every walk of life in town came to that and helped out and cleaned up the community. That's the kind of vision we have for Stoughton, is that everyone, regardless of your position on political events, political sides and things like that, we want to come together and do what's best for the town, whether it's cleaning it up, you know, by volunteering and picking up bags of trash, or, you know, having the Winter Warmer Lights Parade or the Veterans Day Parade, reflagging graves, you know, you name it. That's what Stoughton is, and that's the vision we have for it. So on December 6th, you know, that's where we're going to be. That's what Stoughton is going to be.
I want to thank all of you for this enlightening hour we spent together. I hope voters will watch it, and to get to know the candidates too. That's very important. I want to thank you for tuning in. I'm Mike Hardman. Have a good night.